8 foods from history, better than anything we eat today. Let's begin. Number 8. The spice Rome loved to death. 2,000 years ago, the most valuable substance in the Mediterranean wasn't gold or silk, it was a plant. It was called Silphium, and it grew wild on a single narrow strip of coast near the city of Cyrene, in what is now Libya. Nowhere else. Every attempt to grow it elsewhere failed, which made the wild supply the only supply on Earth. Its sap, grated over food, was the most sought-after seasoning in the ancient world, and it made Cyrene one of the richest cities of its age. The Romans prized it so highly, they said it was worth its weight in silver. Julius Caesar is recorded storing over 1,000 pounds of it in the state treasury alongside the gold. It was seasoning, medicine, and, famously, a contraceptive, all in one plant no one could farm. You can already see the problem. A wildly valuable plant, growing in one place, refusing to be farmed, facing soaring demand. The Romans harvested it and grazed their livestock on it faster than it could ever regrow. According to Pliny the Elder, by the 1st century it had become so rare that the last known stalk was presented to the Emperor Nero as a curiosity. And then there was none. Silphium is the first plant we have written record of humanity loving into total extinction. We don't even know for certain what it was. Botanists still argue over which giant fennel is its closest living relative. But it left one strange fingerprint on the modern world. Silphium's seed was shaped like a heart, and the people of Cyrene stamped that heart onto their coins to advertise their treasure. Many historians believe that little seed, from a spice eaten to extinction 2 millennia ago, is where we got the shape we now use to mean love. Number 7. The pear you'll never taste. In 1921, a fruit expert named Ulysses Hedrick published an enormous book called The Pears of New York. In it, he described hundreds of varieties and singled one out above all the rest. The Ansault, he wrote, had flesh so tender it was buttery, with a rich sweetness and a delicate perfume. Better, he said, than any other pear. It first fruited in a French nursery in 1863, and for a few decades it was the finest dessert pear a person could grow. You will never eat one. The Ansault is extinct. It was killed not by disease or war, but by something far more mundane: inconvenience. The trees grew in irregular shapes that didn't suit the tidy rows of a commercial orchard. As farming industrialized, growers wanted reliable, uniform, profitable trees, and the temperamental Ansault was none of those things. So nurseries stopped stocking it, farmers stopped planting it, and by the early 20th century, the last trees quietly died, taking the variety's genes with them forever. And the Ansault is not alone. By one widely cited estimate, more than 90% of the fruit and vegetable varieties grown in America a century ago have simply disappeared. Thousands of apples, beans, and peas, flavors described in old catalogues that no living person has ever tasted. There is, though, a faint note of hope. In the American Northwest, a retired investigator named David Benscotter now hunts for extinct apple trees in abandoned homesteads, and has already rediscovered several thought lost for good. The Ansault pear is almost certainly gone, but somewhere, in a forgotten garden, its equal may still be waiting to be found. Number 6. The tomato bred to be beautiful. The supermarket tomato is a small tragedy most of us have stopped noticing. It is perfect to look at, round, uniform, a bright, glossy red, and it tastes of almost nothing. The usual explanation is that tomatoes are picked hard and unripe so they survive shipping, and that's part of it. But there is a deeper, stranger reason, and it hides inside the tomato's own DNA. A ripe tomato's sugar does not come only from the vine. The unripe green fruit makes some of its own, using tiny green factories in its skin to photosynthesize, exactly like a leaf. Now, wild tomatoes ripen unevenly. A dark green shoulder near the stem lags behind the rest. Shoppers dislike uneven tomatoes, so for decades breeders selected a mutation that made the whole fruit ripen to one flawless, uniform shade. It worked beautifully. The tomatoes looked perfect, and the industry embraced it almost everywhere. Then, in 2012, a team led by Ann Powell at the University of California worked out what that mutation had quietly done. The gene it switched off, called GLK2, was the very gene that built those little sugar-making factories. In making the tomato uniformly beautiful, breeders had accidentally disabled its ability to make its own sugar and flavor. They had traded taste for a prettier shade of red. And for 50 years, nobody knew. The heirloom tomatoes people rave about at farmers' markets are simply the old varieties that never carried the mutation. They ripen blotchy, green-shouldered and ugly, which is exactly why they still taste of something. Number 5. The wheat that conquered the world. If you have ever tasted a loaf made from an old wheat, freshly stone-milled, you may have noticed something. It tastes of more. Nuttier, sweeter, faintly grassy, a flavour most supermarket bread has quietly lost. There are two reasons for that, and both were acts of engineering. The first arrived in the 1870s with the steel roller mill. It could strip a grain into snow-white flour, discarding the germ and the bran, the oily, flavourful, perishable heart of the grain, to make flour that was pale, cheap, and nearly immortal on the shelf. The second reason was a quiet, intense American agronomist named Norman Borlaug. In the 1940s, Borlaug went to Mexico to fight a wheat crisis and noticed a problem. Fertilize ordinary wheat to boost its yield, and the plant grows tall, top-heavy, and collapses under the weight of its own grain. A disaster farmers call lodging. So Borlaug spent years cross-breeding until he had a wheat with a short, stocky stem that refused to fall over. Dwarf wheat. It could carry enormous heads of grain, drink in fertilizer, and yield harvests no farmer had ever seen. When his dwarf wheat reached India and Pakistan in the 1960s, nations on the brink of famine became self-sufficient within years. Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize and is often credited with saving around 1 billion lives from starvation. Today, his dwarf genes sit inside the overwhelming majority of the wheat grown on Earth. But wheat bred for yield, disease resistance, and machine milling was never once bred for flavour. So here is the honest version of this story. The bread on your table is blander than your great-grandmother's, and it is the reason her grandchildren did not starve. Number 4. The bird that grew too fast. The chicken on your plate would be unrecognizable to anyone born before the war. In the 1920s, a meat chicken took around 16 weeks to reach its slaughter weight. Today, it takes about 6. And the modern bird is roughly 4 times heavier, while eating far less feed to get there. The story of how that happened begins, improbably, with a supermarket and a beauty contest. In 1945, America's largest grocer, the A&P Company, joined forces with the US Department of Agriculture and set a simple challenge. Build a better chicken, one so plump you could carve its breast into steaks, and win $10,000. They called it, without irony, the chicken of tomorrow. Breeders across the country began mating their largest hens with their largest cockerels, generation after generation. By 1948, 40 finalists shipped their eggs to a single hatchery, and the winners were paraded through the streets of Georgetown, Delaware. The bird that emerged from all this is the ancestor of nearly every chicken you have ever eaten. A poultry scientist, Martin Zudhoff, later put the old and new birds side by side, feeding a 1957 breed, a 1978 breed, and a modern 2005 breed exactly the same diet. The modern bird grew to more than 4 times the weight of its 1957 great-great-grandparent, on genetics alone, with no added hormones. But breeding a bird to grow this fast comes at a cost the label never mentions. Older, slower breeds spent months building muscle, fat, and connective tissue, the very things that give meat its flavour and bite. Chefs who cook heritage breeds today describe a depth of flavour the 6-week supermarket bird simply never lives long enough to develop. We did not make the chicken worse by accident. We asked for a bird that was bigger, faster, and cheaper, and we got exactly what we ordered. Number 3. The first chocolate. When the Aztecs handed Hernan Cortés a golden cup of chocolate, they were serving something no modern bar can quite reproduce. The cacao they prized belongs to a group we broadly call Criollo, the native one. Its beans are pale, almost ivory, rather than the deep purple of ordinary cacao. And its flavour is famously soft, nutty, creamy, aromatic, with almost none of the harsh bitterness we link with chocolate. The Olmec, the Maya, and the Aztec valued these beans so highly that they used them as money. So what happened to it? Criollo has a fatal flaw. It is delicate. The trees fall to disease and give a meagre crop, and a single bad season can wipe out an entire grove. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, growers quietly replaced it with a tougher cousin from the Amazon, Forastero, the foreign one. Forastero is hardy, high-yielding and blunt, a strong, slightly bitter chocolate taste, and not a great deal else. It now makes up the overwhelming majority of the world's cocoa, the stuff inside almost every bar on the shelf. Pure Criollo, meanwhile, has dwindled to a rounding error. By some counts, less than 1 bean in 100 of the global crop. The chocolate the Aztecs treasured has not vanished, but it has become a rarity most people will never knowingly taste. Which means the emperors of Mexico were, in one narrow sense, eating better chocolate than a billionaire buys today. Number 2. The sauce Rome put on everything. Imagine a condiment so beloved that an entire empire poured it over nearly every meal. Meat, fish, vegetables, even fruit and wine. The Romans called it garum, and they were, frankly, obsessed with it. It was made by packing oily fish, anchovies, mackerel, sardines, into salt, and leaving them in the Mediterranean sun to ferment for weeks. The fish essentially digested themselves, dissolving into a clear, amber, intensely savoury liquid. It smelled, by most accounts, appalling. One Roman senator, Seneca, sneered at it as the costly extract of poisonous fish. And yet garum factories lined the coasts of Spain, Italy and North Africa, and the finest bottles could cost a fortune. Here is what the Romans could taste, but could not explain. Fermenting fish releases enormous amounts of glutamate, the exact molecule behind the deep, savoury, mouth-filling sensation we now call umami. It's the same taste that lives in parmesan, in soy sauce, in a slow-roasted mushroom. But umami would not be identified by science for nearly 2,000 years. It took a Japanese chemist, Kikunai Ikeda, who in 1908 isolated glutamate from a seaweed broth and named the fifth taste. The Romans had been harnessing umami since before the birth of Christ. They simply had no word for the magic they were tasting. So why did garum vanish from the Western table? When the Roman Empire fell, so did its infrastructure. Salt was heavily taxed, trade routes filled with pirates, and the fish sauce factories fell quiet. The flavour survived, though. In Italy, a rare sauce called colatura di alici is a direct descendant, and every fish sauce in Southeast Asia is a cousin. So the next time you shake fish sauce over your dinner, know that you are tasting the Roman Empire. Number 1. The banana that tasted like banana sweets. You have almost certainly noticed that artificial banana flavour, banana sweets, banana medicine, doesn't quite taste like a real banana. It's too intense, too sweet, a little bit off. Most people assume the flavour is just a bad imitation. It isn't. It's an accurate imitation of a different banana, one most of us have never eaten. Until the 1950s, the banana sold across Europe and America wasn't the one you know today. It was a variety called the Gros Michel, Big Mike, and by every account it was superior. Larger, creamier, sweeter, with a thicker skin that made it easy to ship, and a richer flavour people adored. It was so dominant that for generations, to most Westerners, the Gros Michel simply was banana. And then a fungus came for it. A soil-borne disease called Panama disease rotted the plantations from the roots. And because every commercial banana is a clone, genetically identical, the fungus tore through them unchecked. There was no cure, and the soil stayed poisoned for years. By the 1960s, the Gros Michel was finished as a commercial crop, and the industry fled to the one variety that could resist the disease, the Cavendish. The Cavendish is the banana in your kitchen right now, hardier, blander, and a little bit boring. Which brings us back to those banana sweets. The artificial flavour was invented while Big Mike still ruled the world. So it was modelled on the richer taste of the Gros Michel, not the Cavendish that replaced it. The sweets didn't get it wrong. The banana changed underneath them. And there's a final twist. A new strain of Panama disease is spreading through the world's Cavendish plantations right now. The same unstoppable rot, hunting the same defenceless clone. One day, fairly soon, your banana may taste different too. Like and subscribe if you want more videos like these. Every reference and all the further reading is in the description below, if you'd like to go deeper. Cheers.